what's up? It's VJ, the brother from the ancient mother, and you're watching the Headspace, Africa's most poignant hip-hop podcast. We focus on the culture, the development, the growth, the evolution, and take an introspective look at what it means to love hip-hop, to do hip-hop, to be hip-hop on this continent. Now, this is a segment that ties in with the series of segments that we've been doing around the GOAT series. Now, if you've been watching those, we'll put the links in the description. We did South African artists primarily who majored in having such an impact that resonated beyond their time frame, which allowed them to navigate a place in the culture where commercially and financially they were legacy builders. They were people who both mined from and gave to the culture of their own continent, and one would argue the world at large when it came to kind of expressing the way that they interpret themselves in the global scope. They epitomize what we here at the Headspace call the 5 principles. Now, if you don't know what those are, they're somewhere on the screen. Yeah, well, somewhere there. Now, these 5 principles are very, very important because they embody what we as the Headspace feel kind of really epitomizes an artist who moves with longevity, an artist who at the end of the day deserves to be called great. Now, most of these artists, in fact all of these artists, were artists who came and kind of really severed and broke ties and kind of came in with their own unique knitting into the South African cultural fabric. All in the era which can be defined as the millennial era. These are artists who were born in the late 80s to the 90s. These are artists who saw the advent of technology stabilize itself, who saw the window into the internet, who saw the incremental growth into what would later become social media and this hyper-dimensional scope of direct interaction with streaming, with this virtual engagement with an audience. These were artists who saw all of that, you name it, from COVID-19 to Y2K to all of the massive cultural dives and leaps. Being a millennial is characterized as being in that time bracket of culture. Now, these are all artists who, to be honest with you, have kind of evolved past their age. We're in an era where they are not young anymore. As a result, this is an era that is governed by a new youth with new voices, new ideas, new views on technology. A youth who might have not seen technology coming but were born in the midst of it, and as a result kind of have a more symbiotic relationship with technology than us millennials do, because to an extent a millennial still uses technology, but the younger generation after that feel like they are a part of it. And now this dynamic difference plays itself out in the way that artists relate to their audiences and even understand the role of their art. Now, we've had artists like the Pros, we've had artists like the Kulichanas, artists like the AKAs, and now I think it would be remiss if we didn't, in that list of artists, mention that there was a time in South African hip-hop, many would argue, even right now, where if you call out the top 3 rappers who have made the most major moves that the country has ever seen, you are resoundingly going to get 3 names. Kwesta, aka Cassper Theory, and perhaps as a notable addition, Ricky Rick. But we'll go into why Ricky Rick is not part of what I term the top 3 later on. Right now, I want to talk about the fact that we haven't done anything on Cassper Theory, and we've been sitting on it for quite a while, and for a good reason. Cassper Theory is an artist who's unique in the sense that when most artists crack it to a level that is resoundingly accepted and revered by the industry, the everyday person logically thinks they must have some amazing musical artistic talent. And as is the case with a lot of critics of Cassper, they have a justifiable case to really look at Cassper Theory's record of being artistic in any shape or form. Now, when you bring this up, this being Cassper's artistic integrity, you're met with a whole onslaught of challenges by, of course, his loyal fans. But I mean, let's look at it. Let's chart the beginning of Cassper's career and really find out if what makes Cassper's inevitable rise to fame and fortune has been talent or something a little bit more interesting. I want to call this episode the Cassper Theory, where we go into what exactly makes Cassper Nyovest and ultimately what has broken Cassper Nyovest. Let's go into it. Now, Cassper Nyovest, first and foremost, was co-signed by South Africa's most broadest, South Africa's probably most lovable rapper that we've ever had. Peace to Double HP. Hip Hop Pantsula was an artist who created something very unique. Something that was a continuation of the tradition to attend to the township narratives, but he did it in a form which made hip-hop undeniably jiggy, undeniably danceful, I don't know if that's a word, but undeniably infectious to a South African audience. He was the big, chubby, smiling rapper who gave us narratives about who the boss was and also what we needed to do to truly tap into the spirit of revolution. Harambe. Now, Double HP, in all of that, with both local and international deals, collaborating with South African vocalists and the likes of A. Marie, having at some point his own late night TV show. He was one of the blueprints of how South African rappers reach the tippity to the top. Now, enter his wingman, a young kid coming through by the name of Cassper Nyovest. He was literally Jabba's shadow. And I think this was deliberate because in hip-hop, do not underestimate the power of the cosign. By Jabba bringing close Cassper Nyovest, he saw something that he couldn't do, that Cassper could. What was this? Now, Jabba was an artist who was pretty much groomed in the boom bap era. We're talking golden era 90s, and as a result, he himself coming into fruition in the mid to kind of late 2000s was somebody who understood the extent of his own creativity. And just like we're talking about the edge of the millennial era, Jabba understood when his time was now curiously beginning to come to an end. And as the kind of greater player of the scene that Jabba was, he understood that at some point the game was bigger than him, and if there's any other thing that a GOAT in his position could do after the milestones that he has achieved was build on to the next generation, create a lasting legacy. And if we look at it, rap music has a lasting narratives of goats giving birth to other goats. This is the tradition. This is the line of succession. When you have somebody who's able to make way for the next generation, it does something for their legacy as well, because they're able to, this artist, live through. And this is exactly what Cassper was. He was Jabba's opportunity to live on through the younger generation. Now, what was the special, extra special essence that Cassper had? You need to understand the climate that Cassper was operating in. 2004, when he released his debut album, 2014, that's 4, was a very interesting time. Now, I'm going to really give you a sense of where we were in 2014. These were the chart-topping tracks at that moment. Anaconda by Nicki Minaj, All About the Money by T.I., Believe Me by Lil Wayne featuring Drake, We Them Boys by Wiz Khalifa, Don't Tell 'Em by Jeremy, Happy by Pharrell. This was an age where the horns were loud, the jewelry was big, hip-hop was ostentatious, things were super extra. Now, Jabba was an artist who was known for being eclectic, but extra was not quite what he had. He's not the kind of guy who could wear 20,000 pieces of jewelry. He wasn't a peacock. He wasn't somebody who could fit neatly into this era of colorful hip-hop, which was beginning to tap into this rainbow glittery style of the late 80s, but still tap into a new kind of metro scene, which was beginning to become this nascent sound we would later call trap. And Cassper was exactly that. He was a kid from Mafeking who had the right credentials. He was born where the rest of the Motswaka movement was cultivated. He was understood by many who would walk that path. He had been brazenly aggressive in his path to being a superstar. For goodness sake, he quit every ambition of continuing with school. And as is famously known, with no cent in his pocket, he went for what many would call the dream. And it was this dream that really allowed him to be in a position where the hip-hop Pantsulas would recognize him as a tool to tapping in to the new generation. Now, what would Cassper's then talent be? How was this appeal to the generation something that made him special? I'm going to tell you why. Because at that time, many a South African rapper was still trying to negotiate how to come out of an era which was influenced mainly by crunk and a commercial sound which was Lil Wayne-esque. Enter Drake, the Young Money sound evolves, we're moving into a more ambient sound. Cassper was able to juggle between that kind of Young Money-esque sound and still give us a Rick Ross, big horn, gangster influence, but yet glittery kind of sound. And this was the thing with Cassper. His gift has always been this. Now, a lot of people are going to say it's clout. No, not exactly. Clout is when you're able to take advantage of a moment. And although Cassper was able to do that in many instances, what his talent is not quite clout. Many would say the art of gimmickry. Sure, the ponytail was really eccentric and it made us look at who he was. But after he chopped it off, he still continued. Many would say connections. And yes, the cosign from Jabba literally gave him the stepping stone. But we see that even after the passing of the giant, Cassper navigated some of the most impressive business moves that this country had ever seen. So if it wasn't the connections, if it wasn't the gimmickry, and if it wasn't the clout, what is Cassper Nyovest's secret extra special talent? I'm going to give it to you right now. Sentiment. What does that mean? Now, when you look at the definition of sentiment, it's got two definitions. Number one, it's a feeling or an opinion. But not just a feeling or an opinion. What's the difference about any other feeling or opinion that doesn't make it a sentiment? To be sentimental, the feeling or opinion that you express needs to be exaggerated, self-indulgent, and tap into, wait for it, this key element, nostalgia. Now, Cassper Nyovest is a walking, talking nostalgia machine. The man understands how to tap into the things that people yearn for in their past, that they see in their present, that they wish they would have in their future. Now I'm about to show you how Cassper Nyovest took over the whole country with nostalgia. Now, from the moment Cassper Nyovest hit the charts, whether it's a Kusheshe, whether it's a Dog Shabeleza, whether it's a Destiny, Cassper Nyovest's chart-topping tracks have had either one of two facets with them. One, they exploit an already present trend. Keep that in mind. And two, they use that trend to tap into people's historical collective imagination. Cassper Nyovest knew that lyrically he couldn't yet compete with the Questa, with the Kulichanas, even with his mentor Jabba. So he knew that his only skill was in understanding the ideas that the people want. Cassper Nyovest epitomized himself as the thing that the people could live through. Whereas other rappers embody their own story and become something that people aspire to be, Cassper Nyovest did it the other way around. He became an open portal for people to put their dreams in. So he was that which people saw themselves through. He became the mirror of South Africa. How did he become this? Step one, most rappers assert themselves as top dogs in the game from the jump. It's important as a rapper to understand your own talent and to live by that word to action. No, not Cassper. His first step in the game was to position himself as the lovable, empathetic puppy that people had to feel sorry for, aka the underdog. His first album, Refilwe, was named after his sister. Check out why. Named after his younger sister because he didn't have money to travel, and that was the person who literally took her last cent and was able to bring him to Joburg. Now it's things like that that set Cassper apart. He knows that the sentiment of having your first album named after your sister who sacrificed her money for you rather than having your album named after, I don't know, your favorite chain or where you come from, it's not going to happen. Sentiment, nostalgia, this is what trumps. Now Cassper understood that. He plays the game. He moves and he evolves and he goes further with that. Now, bear in mind that by the time he's dropping this album, he is giving us tracks like Tibib, Skepti Daba, which have that Kwaito-esque feel. And when you look at Cassper's whole lyrical archive, it's glittered with references from the past. It frames him in a position where many still don't treat him like the skillful artist that he is. Basically, Cassper creates this narrative that the whole game is against him. Line after line, he builds this story until people see it. Because at that time, who else is functioning? AKA, with his theme from the Ivy League and connections with Kulichana and Pro, is somebody who's seen already as well respected and exploiting the game. Questa, with his cosigns from Squatter Camp and doing what he does, is solidified in the game as being the K1 Lone Ranger and somebody who represents a kind of new classification of rap. Ricky Rick, somebody who kind of comes from this new booming scene of urban aesthetics and is here to kind of separate himself by being more focused on the aesthetics. All of these competitors were people who in their own right were there to dominate their lane. Cassper doesn't have a lane to dominate. As a result, his story is, I can't dominate a lane because they won't let me in. Radio won't let me in. The industry won't let me in. And this story of not being let in, this narrative, whether it is true or not, is what Cassper Nyovest used to pluck at the heartstrings of the everyday South African. Now, if that isn't genius, I don't know what is. If somebody who doesn't take rap and subverts it on the bottom, and instead of trying to be the best, cashes in on showing people that he's in the worst position and thus it is difficult for him to be the best, gets an audience that roots for him simply because they want to change that. They want to contribute their money. They want to contribute their voice to standing up for somebody who they believed is being oppressed. Genius. This is the Cassper Theory. The theory of sentiment. The theory of taking nostalgia and the feeling that people have by being trampled by the world and capitalism and having little opportunities. We all know what it's like to not get that job we feel we deserved because somebody who was less qualified did it, or somebody who had more connections. We know what it's like to have that girlfriend who was probably taken by another guy, or who we lost simply because we didn't have the money or the opportunities. Cassper taps into that, and because that's the story of the majority, Cassper knows that most people feel fucked by life, and as a result, he epitomizes himself as the spirit of that. He becomes the artist who speaks for the voice of the voiceless, but not in the typical political way. Cassper's not overtly going to speak out against the politics of the world because he doesn't have the informed opinion of that. So what does he do? He epitomizes the heart of it. He says, what do you do against the world which has set itself up not to make you succeed? You find angles and you break through. He does all of this by appearing to be remorseful, by appearing to be empathetic, and by appearing to be somebody you could easily feel sorry for. And this, folks, is my theory on how the sales began to boom. I mean, when you listen to Kusheshe till this day, it basically sounds like Rick Rock's peak moments. You listen to, no, not Kusheshe, Dr. Belesha. You listen to Kusheshe, it was basically an extension of the OK Malum Cool Cat movement. You listen to any track Cassper has ever done, there is a reference for what that track is, and all he has ever really done stylistically is extend existing trends. But his secret element in how he makes that work is that what the other artist doesn't have is people already feeling like they need to invest in their story because that's their guy, that's their chap. This is the person who they need to get to the top of the industry. Now let me tell you how this was both phenomenally strategic for Cassper, but has become literally the essence of his demise. Now, the Cassper Theory, the sentiment theory, the sentiment strategy works because at this time he's having his altercation with AKA, who's now seen as the villain, and he's now seen as the hero, which helps Cassper strategize even further by making deals that allow for him to take all of what the audience has been feeling and epitomizes through this vision of Fill Up. Now, Project Fill Up isn't just a gimmick of filling up stadiums. It's literally the embodiment of Cassper's strategy. When people feel sorry for you, when people feel like you are the one who epitomizes their dreams, when people feel like you are the one and only that they can rely on to really be their hero when it comes down to contributing to a capitalist voice. You give them a platform where they can engage with you. And Philip became this movement. And all of a sudden, he's filling up the Dome, Moses Mugaba Stadium, and every other stadium. Because at this point, he's really just filling up people's imaginations with this notion of sentiment. He's expanding it, and he's moving through Tulufelo, into Refilwe, right into Tuto. It's 2017. Now at this point, he's navigating the currency of this sentiment by partnering up with powerful brands to show people that the Cassper who you saw moving from the dust, the Cassper who was waving his ponytail, has literally caught the industry high horse and now doesn't even need to garnish a ponytail, clips it off, becomes an ascendant artist in their own right, has Bentleys galore, starts his own label, which shows that he's supporting other artists and has a team in his own right. Now the Cassper story is going well. Where it starts to break is when hip-hop is going through a bit of a lull in South Africa and we see the phase of Afro beats coming to us into ascendancy. Cassper is bankrupt of creative resources. He no longer has immediate styles that he could easily blend into. It was easy to blend into the American trap sound. It was easy to take these crunk-esque sounds. It was easy to either do a rendition of Drake or a rendition of Ross. It was easy to do all of that. But now, you gotta be a little bit Nigerian or know a Nigerian to conquer the game. And Cassper partners up with Davido, and this is during the time of Sweet and Short. He transcends his sound, and this is when many are beginning to say, hold up now, we thought you were all about the rap. How come you're jumping into other sounds? And at this point that Cassper uses this allegation to say again, how dare you close my capacity to experiment artistically? There we go again. He's tapping into the sentiment. Now he breaks free of the expectation that audiences have to stick to genre. He's swimming in Afrobeat, but because he doesn't have the rhythm or even the approach or the cultural insight it takes to do this trend masterfully, this is not an album that really did as well as his previous. And this is when we see the foundation of the sentiment effect start to waver down. By the time we get to Amen, any minute now, we're entering into the era where piano's door is about to be wide open. This is 2020. We're seeing a new generation. And Cassper positions himself as the GOAT who the young piano artists would love to have collaborations with. And all of a sudden, his nostalgia finds new life. He finds a way to again rise to the top of the charts and slow down and land softly into the bosom of his packs of money. Le Pleni Lendile, folks. And you bet that when he did this, he thought he had it up until artists of that generation began to show the capacity of creativity, talent that they had. And this is what happened, folks. When you are an interpreter of sound instead of an innovator, when you are somebody who rests on trend instead of focuses on how to set them, when you are somebody who's waiting to echo out a sound instead of devising on shouting your own voice, you're trapped in always waiting for somebody else to determine the tide. And eventually, you're going to find yourself in waters that are too deep for you. And I feel like this is the era where Cassper's waters have run too deep. And he's sinking into a huge ocean that is way younger for him to really stabilize himself through. Artists of his ilk have seen that lesson. Questa teamed up with Kabza the Small, creating an album which was as much Kwaito as it was piano. Leveraging himself in a place where he's creating a sound which is more natural to who he is. AKA, with his singles, takes a little bit of here and there, but still manages to have a sound which opens itself up to pockets of innovation because of his own production insights. And it fits neatly into his narrative. All of Cassper's quote-unquote competitors and fellow artists, even KO, with his reinvention of the Afrobeat sound, found a way to give us hooks and an interpretation of that instrumental sound which was not rooted in Nigeria. So finally people could dance to Afrobeat in a way which felt indelibly South African. Where is Cassper in all of this? Cassper is getting booed while performing Barnabas Stout by his own audience. Casper's new singles are being literally refuted by his own audience. What is happening? For the first time ever, the cracks in the sentiments are opening up. And why is it? Simply because if you're gonna ride on sentiment, you better deliver something that the people feel like has also contributed to making their lives better. This was Casper's first mistake. You can't be a sentimental artist if you don't fully understand the politics of sentiment. When people feel like they live their dreams through you, and yet all you do with your dreams is just give more money to those in power, at some point people feel like you're a distant memory to what they thought you were. And when the only thing that was keeping you in touch with the people no longer resonates, then you've lost them. Cassper first lost the people by disengaging his dialogue of empathy, because he could no longer pretend like he's the underdog. Because now he actually has money. Now he actually has a mansion. Now he's actually flown to the States and the UK. Now he's actually rapped for Sway and for Hot 97. Now he's been where everybody hoped that he would be. What do you do when nostalgia has reached the ceiling? He didn't do anything with it. He didn't go back and try to find a way to relate to the very same people who got him there. Instead, he flaunts his wealth even more. And this can cause a slow growth of resentment, which is what I feel began to happen to Casper's audience. And they were looking for answers through his music. But the only thing he still focuses on in his music now is the fact that he's a hotshot, he's making money, and nobody can amount to who he is. Casper's strategy and theory of sentiment goes so deep that now that he's seen that the music is not enough to speak for him, now that he's in the position where because he's made it, because the trends he used to exploit have far gone, because he's in a place where he can't easily access the cultural leverage of his time, he created this boxing extravaganza where again, the literal point of it is for people to embody themselves in this match. It's for Cassper to again, because the industry that was fighting him is now something he's won over, now he literally just have actual individuals who are fighting him. So that people support him winning on an actual metaphysical and mythical level. This is Casper's strategy. He understands that he's people's fighter. And I think whether it's him surprisingly winning a fight or him losing a fight and claiming that he was robbed by the judges, everything Cassper does is an expression of the fact that his narrative is, I am being robbed by a system and I am the one who's gonna fight to the bone. And I need your support. Give me the spirit. Give me the gloves. Be the one whose energy allows me to push through the hate so I can truly win this fight. This is the narrative of the Cassper Theory. So isn't that ironic that Cassper has become the very same thing he claimed was standing in his way? Cassper has become the money-making OG with connections who makes it difficult for younger artists to come through. Cassper has become the one that other people speak out against because they feel he's standing in the way of their success, he's stealing their trends, he doesn't have any good ideas. Lo and behold, Cassper has become the very same monster he claimed to fight. And this is the demise of where the sentiment breaks down. Cassper had a genius plan, but the only problem is that he really wasn't what he claimed to be. Cassper wasn't the artist who would do with South Africans' dreams something they could feel impactfully. Cassper was not the voice that could make sense of things like Fees Must Fall, of the constant load-shedding crisis. Cassper isn't the artist that people put their hopes in, because at the end of the day, all he ended up being was somebody who used people's need for change to become yet another fat cat. So, in other words, Cassper is the hip-hop version of the ANC. Cassper Nyovest has managed to get himself in a position where he formally represented liberation. People supported him, he grows, and he becomes the voice of freedom, But now when you look at him, he feels like the only thing he contributes to the lives of the people is the idea of a dream, but not the reality of it. Now, I have to call names out because in this country, we live in the very palpable results of political parties that have ruled. And apart from who you vote for, who you don't vote for, the ultimate voice of how the people feel is really indistinguishable. They still vote the ANC because it's like a lover who's trapped in an abusive relationship. You feel like this is the best you have. But the only difference is that Cassper's fans now feel like they have more choice. We have younger artists, the vocalistics, the young stunners, and many more who now show more talent, appeal, and hope in ways that people feel they can easily just jump out of the Cassper boat. Now, what does Cassper do in this situation? When the music no longer hits as hard as it used to, because he doesn't know how to immediately connect to it, because quite frankly, he's too old. When the narrative doesn't stick because now he's not struggling to get money, he has it. What do you rap about when in the early formative years of your career, you rapped about trying to make it, then you rapped about making it, now you've made it? What do you rap about? Serious question for rappers who also aspire to be in this Cassper model. When all you're rapping for is the individual capacity to succeed, and the people believe in the fact that you are the one who represents this underdog and you reach the plateau, how do you truly give back to those that have given to you? How do you use the story of being at the top to still speak to those who are still at the bottom? How do you make the right kind of deals? Is it through the sneaker deal that he was still allegedly accused of stealing from a Chinese brand? Do you try and create your own version of the Ciroc deal by creating your own alcohol brand, like he's trying to do with Biliato? Is that how you reach out to people? By selling them shit? Do you give back to your fan base by selling their freedom through a bottle of aperitif or a low quality brand of sneakers? Is that how you give back to the fan base that has given back to you? These are very important political questions, and I feel that the difference now is when as an artist you stand up for who you are, you don't end up in this position because you've always believed in your capacity to speak to the people. Cassper decided to spread the message of being in the position where he couldn't truly tell the story because the system was the problem. And I think this is telling of a larger problem. When we think that our real problem is the president or a certain political organization, and we completely divorce our own sense of responsibility from what's happening, we end up in a position where we're not going to have anybody to blame but ourselves for taking charge of whatever situation we find ourselves in. So I think if there's one thing that the Cassper Theory can teach us, is that it is convenient to blame a system which isn't working. But when it starts to work for you, then what excuse do you have? My name is VJ, the brother from the Ancient Mother. Tell me if you agree with this. I think this is what's happening. I think millennial rap is at its edge, at its end. This is the fade out for many of our, all of our millennial artists. And I think Cassper is the one who's fading out into trickles of dust. I don't think he'll have much of a musical legacy. I think we'll remember Cassper as the guy who taught us business strategies and of course this understanding of nostalgia and sentiment and how to make it work to the public, and maybe there'll be better examples in the future. Maybe there'll be artists who, because the system is fucking us, will rise to power and try to do something about it. Maybe Jay-Z is doing the same thing in the United States. Maybe he cashed in on the very same sentiment and he's a Cassper sitting at the top of the pyramid and not truly giving back to the people. I don't know. Please talk to me in the comment section. This has been another wonderful episode, and I hope that from this discussion we're able to truly engage on why hip-hop in this continent isn't growing, or isn't growing into the direction that we want it to, or is it? I don't know, you tell me. I think we have a long way to go because we're still giving a hip-hop whose identity doesn't speak to us. Peace.